Welcome back to Christian Bootcamp. I forget what episode this is. You may hear the dogs freaking out a bit today. So just don't pay any attention to them. I have two dogs. I have a miniature schnauzer and then a Yorkie poo. And of course the Yorkie poo thinks she's the boss. We're continuing to talk about Christian characteristics or characteristics of a Christian. And today we're going to talk some about Christian love. This episode, I'm not really sure how long it will last. Probably at least 2 sessions, maybe 3 sessions. I guess it's according to how long-winded that I get. One thing you want to remember is that non-Christians read you and not the Bible. You know, we've talked about your sphere of influence and how that works. But really, I mean, do you think they're going to read the Bible? No. They read you, right? They check you. They follow you. They, especially if they notice a change in you, then they're going to become curious about what that change is. And one of the biggest changes that you can have is Christian love. Before we get started talking about that, I had this website that I wanted to share with you. It is daretoshare.org. And if you go to it, you can subscribe to their stuff. Really love this newsletter. It comes out about once a week. This is mostly for young people, I would think. Even if you're old fogey like me, you will probably enjoy it. I subscribe to all of them. Again, we need to sink into the Word. You know, I mean, we really need to do it. Again, great site. Check it out. So back to talking about love. We talked previously about 1 Corinthians 13. I had you read that a couple times. The main reason is that, hey, that is an awesome chapter about love. But in Matthew 22, 36 to 40, we get another reason why love is important. And so somebody asked Jesus, says, "Teacher, which is the greatest commandment in the law?" And Jesus replied, "Love the Lord your God with your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind. This is the first and greatest commandment." So he says, first off, you should love God with everything you have. All. The second is love your neighbor as yourself. And then he goes on to say, all the law and the prophets hang on these 2 commandments. If you think about it, the 10 commandments, if you love your neighbor, then you won't murder someone, you know, you won't steal from them, you won't commit adultery, etc. So, again, he tells us really, he boils the 10 down into 2. You love the Lord your God with all your heart and everything in you, and you love your neighbor as yourself. Okay. He goes on to tell a really interesting story, the Good Samaritan story. And it comes from Luke 10, 25 to 37. It's the parable of the Good Samaritan. Now, parables are little stories that Jesus told. One thing I think, personally, again, this is just my personal opinion, I think the parables were true stories. In other words, I think they were stories that really happened. as you're reading the New Testament, one of the things you'll notice is that everybody tried to test Jesus. All the religious leaders and things like that, they wanted to test Jesus to see if he was the real thing or just a fake. So on this occasion, that's what happened. On one occasion, this is from Luke 10:25-37. On one occasion, an expert in the law stood up to test Jesus. So he was trying to get him to say something that they could use to end up convicting Jesus, or for, saying he was sacrilegious or whatever. Teacher, he asked, what must I do to inherit eternal life? And it's funny, Jesus he was pretty cool. He always points back to him and says, what is written in the law? And how do you read it? And this next verse proves that whoever this was had been listening to Jesus, because he repeats back to him what he had told him before. Verse 27 says, he answered, love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your strength, and with all your mind, and love your neighbor as yourself. And Jesus tells him, hey, you've been listening, you've answered correctly. Do this, and you will live. But then, old dude tries to trap him, and he says, and who is my neighbor? So, who is my neighbor? So Jesus replies to him in verse 30, and he says, a man was going down from Jerusalem to Jericho when he was attacked by robbers. They stripped him of his clothes and beat him and went away, leaving him half dead. So, during this time, there were a bunch of bandits that roamed around, and the road from Jerusalem to Jericho was pretty crazy sometimes. But anyway, a band of robbers attacked this dude, took his clothes, money, beat him, and thought he was dead, so threw him in the ditch. So then we have a priest happened to be going down the same road, and when he saw the man, he passed by on the other side. So to a Levite, when he came to the place and saw him, passed by on the other side too. But a Samaritan, as he traveled, came where the man was, and when he saw him, he took pity on him. And he went to him and bandaged his wounds, pouring on oil and wine, and then he put the man on his own donkey and brought him to an inn and took care of him. The next day he took a couple of denarii and gave them to the innkeeper and said, look after him, and when I return, I will reimburse you for any extra expense you may have. So then, Jesus asked the man a question. So which of these three do you think was a neighbor to the man who fell into the hand of the robbers? And the expert in the law replied, the one who had mercy on him. And Jesus said, go and do likewise. A very, very interesting story, and I'm sure that this guy was probably either a Levite or a priest. And so this, probably made him feel very angry. And that's why one of the reasons I think when he asked him who, did the right thing, he didn't say, oh, the Samaritan did. No, he said, the one who had mercy on him. So you have a priest, he sees the dude in the ditch, he goes, on the other side of the road. The Levite, same deal. He sees the guy in the ditch, and he goes on the other side of the road. And the Samaritan sees him and goes and helps him. Not only does he help him out, he tends to his wounds, he takes him to shelter, he pays for his room. We need to be the Samaritan. And the one reason why that Jesus used a priest, a Levite, and a Samaritan was because the priest and Levite were religious dudes. In other words, they, were people that didn't walk, they talked a lot, but they didn't walk their talk. What I want to encourage you is to walk your talk. Right? We need to show love to people that are around us. The people that are easy to love, they don't count. It's the people that are hard to love, and we need to help them. I mean, think about Jesus. He spent most of his time with, tax collectors, Samaritans, prostitutes, etc. So anyway, so go and do likewise. What I would like you to do is start memorizing these verses here, Matthew 22:36-40. That way, if you get tempted, then you can just look back and say, hey, this is what the book says. Now we're going to give you some examples of that in action. So tomorrow we're going to, again, talk about some examples. One from a story that I read, I want to share with you and read it to you. It really touched my heart. And the other is from a personal experience that I had. So we'll see you tomorrow. We're praying for you and we love you.